Welcome to the One Day at a Time Recovery Podcast, where my guests share their stories of addiction, how they recovered, and the tools and practices they use to stay sober now. Courtney, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me on. I'm excited to chat with you.
I know it's been a minute. We talked a while back when your book came out, Sober Vibes, and we had a great conversation. I was just looking through. I was like, I need to find some women who I respect, who are doing good things in the recovery community, who have, really solid sobriety. And I thought we could talk today. We were just talking about the transition period.
Yes.
And when people get sober, and they start doing all this recovery work, I think what happens for a lot of people is their authentic self starts to emerge,
Mm-hmm.
right? And people start to realize I'm not in the right job, I'm not in the right
Oh, yeah.
marriage, I don't have
Hmm.
the right friends. Like suddenly it's like, uh-oh.
Right? Like, what have I done? What
What
have I
have,
done?
what have I done?
Right.
And so, I thought we could talk about maybe some solutions on how to handle sort of that liminal state of transition, like being in the hallway. Um, Before we actually jump into it, though, I do like to do the lightning round of
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
When you first got sober, were there any books that really spoke to you in early recovery?
God, I think I said this last time, but the one in early recovery that I read was uh, Carolyn Knapp's
Oh,
"Drinking a Love
a love
Affair."
story. Yeah.
Yeah, or love story. Yes, that one still. I feel like, and I've probably said it on this last episode, but I need to reread that one to
Yeah.
see if where I'm at today I can still relate back to that. Right.
Yeah. How long have you been sober now?
12 years in
12
August.
years.
Yeah, August will be 13.
August will be 13. Lucky 13. Can't get
Uh-huh.
to 14 till you get through.
Uh-huh. That's right.
Yeah, lucky 13. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've done probably close to 400 episodes, and that book has probably come up the most.
Because it's the original Quit Lit, if you think about it. I mean, of just
Yeah.
the way that that book was all about her quitting and that relationship that she had with alcohol, you know? So I
Yeah.
really do think that's the OG.
Yeah, that is the OG. Yeah, and when I
Hmm.
got sober, there was no quit lit. There was
Hmm.
like the big book, and that was about it. And so I
Right.
got sort of, you know, I was in that world, and so I didn't really, read a whole lot. And actually, what's funny? I have to confess, that's one of the books I haven't read yet. So I will
Yeah,
definitely,
read it. And it's a quick
yeah.
read too. Because she's a great,
Oh, is it?
yeah, it's a quick read and she was a great writer. She passed away. She actually passed away of
I know.
lung cancer. So, but
Yeah,
yeah, it was a good read.
yeah. I was like, oh, I need to get her on, and then I looked her up, and I was like, oh man.
Hmm. That
Another.
just happened with me with Melody Beattie,
I
Codependent No
know.
More. And because I had reached out to her team last year, and so I was
Mm.
following up because they told me around this time, and I followed up a couple months after the time, and I think it was her daughter who responded, and she's like, "I'm so sorry, Melody Beattie passed away. I didn't know she passed away." And I was
Oh my
like,
God.
"Oh my God, I am so sorry." Like, so, but yeah.
Yeah, that's rough. I mean, but it's so beautiful that we have their books.
Yes,
We
yes.
have their books.
That's what I told her daughter. And I was like, you don't understand how much your mom's writing of that book helped me with that issue that I had no idea what codependency was until I
Hmm.
read that. And I was like, oh my God, check. Yes, 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 yes. So,
Yeah, I went to a women's group for probably the first 8 years of my sobriety, and they would read that at the beginning as sort of like a jumping off place. It was like
yeah.
her daily, not the actual book, but the daily meditation one,
Hmm.
the daily
Hmm.
reader. That was so good. Yeah, it was really pivotal for my
I,
recovery as well.
I need to get that one because I don't have it. So,
Oh my God, it's so good. And it
mhm.
was so interesting because I kind of feel like under every alcoholic is a codependent. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, those are okay. So a couple of really good books. Um, if you look back over the last 12 years, do you have sort of a theme to your recovery? Are there mantras or quotes that you live by?
Um, there is one affirmation, well, like two, I would probably say that I had to well, three, I'm sorry. One day, one day at a time will always be like a great one to always
Yeah.
have at the top because there's no other truth. And especially after you get past a point in sobriety and kind of dipping more into maybe, your spirituality, whatever it is that you believe, then you see truly what that truly, truly, truly means, right? Like
Yeah.
in the beginning, it's like, all right, let me recite this just to get through, like just to get through it. But as years go on, it's like really when you get into the practice of staying present, that one is
Hmm.
like the number one. Then my other two would be I am bright, brilliant, and beautiful because I had to do a lot of self confident work, right? And then the other one that I absolutely adore and I use it to this day is I'm exactly where I need to be right now.
That one's a good one. Gosh, I suffer from time anxiety.
Mm,
That
yeah.
idea, like, I'm not doing enough, life is passing me by, and that idea that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to
Yes.
be
Yes.
just like takes the pressure off, right?
1000%. And like it's just especially too, it was a couple of years in and I had a bunch of anxiety and a friend actually told me about it and I started using it and I was like, "Oh, man, this works." But then as the years have gone on too, especially with the time one you just said,
Hmm.
like even a couple weeks ago, I went to my son's little Mother's Day thing. And it was my first little Mother's Day
Mm,
at school, right?
cute. Yeah.
And I saw this, we got a picture taken, and I was just like, this is exactly, I looked at the picture and it's like, this is exactly where I need to be right now, right? Like I was kind of thrown off from the day because it was going to be just an hour and a half worth of time of him at school, right? It kind of threw me off
Hmm.
my game. I didn't know
Yeah,
until the
yeah,
day
yeah.
before. So then I had to put it in perspective of like, it's okay. You just gotta let the to do be until a husband comes home and then I can get it done. But yeah, so that exactly where I need to be right now works all the time.
Yeah, it's so funny. We get so attached to like, oh my gosh, there's all these things I have to do.
Yes,
But the truth of the matter is, it's like, and the important is not urgent, and the urgent is rarely important,
right.
right?
Exactly.
And
Right.
it helps kind of bring us back to the present moment, which I'm always fighting against.
Mm-hmm.
But
And I
yeah,
think a lot of people do.
everybody does. I mean, that's
Hmm.
the whole thing about recovery. It's like we have all these. I had this one counselor who talked about we have all these little escapes from the present moment, right? Like we have, that's what being distracted is all about. There's something
Hmm.
about the current moment, about the present moment that is not okay.
Right.
And really, it really is. But in
Hmm.
my mind, it's like I'm thinking about the things I have to do, or I'm stressed out about something that happened in the past. So, this idea, all these little sort of tricks and tools that we have are to sort of, help us to relax and bring us in the present moment, which where we
Right.
can make choices.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, that's good. I love those three. Um, is there one thing you wish you would have known when you first got sober?
My God, yes. Like to
Sorry.
relax. Like
Relax.
yeah,
Yeah.
to tell yourself to shut the F up, right? Like just to tell yourself like
Shh.
and right, because it is, again, it's just like there's so much thinking that goes involved and it's exhausting. But honestly, besides those two, the number one thing is to I wish I would have, and I do this a lot with my clients and tell people on the podcast, like just rest. You don't
Yeah.
have to be doing 1,000 things at once just because you got sober. Your body needs to go through that resting phase, and
Yeah.
like doing nothing is doing something. Truly, so
100%.
so
Yeah. Especially
so
for those of us that are sort of like overachievers. It's like the work is to actually do less
yes, exactly. And
because that's
like
hard.
to sit into that, it is very hard. And to your nervous system is totally has to get back to a ground zero of what you just put your body through for so many years, right? So it doesn't feel natural just to be sitting because of, you're used to being in chaos.
Right. Yeah. And I'm sure you hear this all the time too. I hear it from my clients about this idea of like sort of feeling bored. at
Yeah.
first. And it's like,
Mhm.
of course you feel bored. Your dopamine is starting to come back to a baseline, a
Mhm.
homeostasis, like a reasonable place. It dips first
Right.
and then it comes back up, but
Yep.
it's like a lot of people have been living in survival mode where they're just in chronic chaos, so
Mhm.
that not being in chronic chaos feels boring. Life
Yeah.
starts to feel flat at first, but that is only temporary.
Yeah, it is. Because then too, it's like nowadays, it's like, man, I love a peaceful Friday night. You know what I mean? Like, I love
You.
sitting here and watching Toy Story 1 for the 1000th time, having like a family night. Like this is what it should
Yeah.
feel like, you know?
Yeah,
Because you
peaceful. I
do,
love that.
you have to create your peace, and you have to, when you get into recovery, you have and protect that at all costs, you know?
Yeah, it's so funny because when I first got sober, I was like terrified of being boring.
Hmm.
But I'm like, wait, but then as you recover and you start realizing, oh, that is such a codependent thought. It's like I'm afraid of what other people think of me. It's like, wait a minute,
Yes.
I actually love my peace. I
Yes.
love being comfortable. I love being at peace. I love being boring, I guess. Like I just don't thrive
Yes.
in chaos anymore. I don't need that kind of excitement in my life.
No, because I mean, that was, uh, that was you and that different identity, right? Like that was like, and now you have that new identity, and that chaos
Yeah.
doesn't come with that new person.
Yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
That might be a good transition because we were talking about identity, and I thought we could sort of talk about the challenges. It's like, okay, it's not really about getting sober. Like if you quit drinking yesterday, you're sober. So it's
Mhm.
kind of like about staying stopped, but as you progress in your recovery and you start getting some time under your belt, you have some stability.
Mhm.
I have noticed that there's a few things that happen, like your true identity starts to emerge, and
Mhm.
you start recognizing that, oh my gosh, like maybe the relationship I'm in isn't in alignment with my authentic self. Maybe
Mhm.
friendships, it's also very difficult to end friendships, especially if
Yes.
they're sort of rooted in codependency. Um, but let's just kind of take and work. Work can be a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
I work with a lot of like doctors and lawyers or high achieving people that they have been drinking because of this tremendous amount of stress and they
Mhm.
don't have boundaries. Like they way overgive because they feel like they should.
Mhm.
So if we just take one of these things at a time, I think we can start maybe close to home. They say not to make any major changes your first year. But what would you say to somebody who is starting to realize that they may not be in the right relationship?
Yeah. Well, yes. I always suggest don't blow up your life that first year because so much is
Yeah.
going on. So let's just take it then if you're after year one,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
you really do. There's so much going on with that year, especially emotionally, and the highs and lows, and just getting to a baseline. But
Yeah.
definitely, if after a year you're like, this is just not working out, then it's just not working out, right? Like if in a relationship, like if you have tried everything, and or you're like, our relationship was based on drinking. A lot of people's relationships are
Yeah.
based on that. And you want to keep continuing to do better for yourself. I'm not saying your other half isn't better. I'm just saying that you don't no longer align in that relationship, then it's time to go. And I kind of come back from my parents divorced when I was 7, right? And so I know that as an adult now, where it's like some people, just because you get married, it does not mean that you need to stay married. I come from that. It's like, what damage are you doing to the kids? If you're in an unhappy marriage, the kids are going to see that. And then at 18 years old, still be like, what is going on? Now they have to figure that out with mom and dad at 18. And at 7, you're still going to have to figure that out. So I come from a background of that. I don't, marriage is not because, a couple of us generations have grew up with the idea that Prince Charming's coming to save us, right?
Girl, I had to kiss a lot of frogs to find my prince charming.
Exactly. And, of being in a marriage, I understand what a commitment is and going into, I understand that. And plus, too, if you've never been modeled that, you never got
Yeah,
modeled a healthy relationship, a healthy marriage, chances are you're not going to model that the first time, right?
right.
So if it no longer aligns to you, I say get out. If you're like, this guy's an
Yeah.
ass, like, why continue to stay and torture yourself? I do believe in trying to do all the things if you can make it work, especially if there's
Okay.
children involved. But if there's not, there's not. And it's just time to move
Yeah.
on.
What would you consider doing all the things to be?
Oh,
To,
therapy, right? Couples
yeah.
therapy. Um, Usually whatever they suggest you in couples therapy, right? Like if you did a little bit of a trial separation and, going that route before just pulling the trigger. So yeah, so doing that kind of stuff, dating one
Yeah.
another for a minute to see how that is, but yeah, but not just throwing in the towel without trying to give it a little bit of a fight.
Yeah, I feel like it's so interesting because and it definitely depends on the scenario, right? Like if
Yeah, absolutely.
there's what I would consider brick wall boundaries, and then there's relationship negotiation. So brick wall boundaries are obviously things like verbal abuse, physical abuse,
Yes.
things like that, financial abuse. Those to me are brick wall boundaries,
Hmm.
and separation is necessary.
Right.
But then there's relationship negotiation, and I feel like people, sort of reach the end of their tools
Hmm.
with certain people, and so there even in therapy, even certain therapists, couples therapists will sort of have limited tools. So I kind of feel like you give it you go to a couple different therapists, couples
Hmm.
therapy. Your partner has to be like 100% committed. You have to be
Yes.
100% committed to doing the work. Um, I really appreciate like the 12-step model of both people are sort of doing their process
Hmm.
with their best of intentions and best efforts. A lot of that can resolve. But if you do all that and come to this place where like you actually want different things,
Yes.
maybe one person wants to live close to family, maybe one person wants to move out of state, maybe like goals or careers change and you're just like no longer in alignment on like a
Yeah.
fundamental issue on a
Hmm.
fundamental then it's time to really honor who you actually are and who they actually are, and it's like a release with love kind of a
Yes.
scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure, all of those. And yeah, it does depend on your situation, So, and that's the thing. You might just wake up one day and not like the person because that's what I have learned just from
yeah,
I'll be married 10 years with Matt for 14 at this point. And it's like, you really do. When I hear experts say some experts say, like, the one thing is like, you really have to like this person. And that is so
yeah,
true. And some people don't like each other. And then plus two, coming out of a drinking situation, both of you played a part
yeah,
into the one person who was drinking. And I say this to clients. And this is why I'm a firm believer of like, do not just like blow it up. Not all clients, but some don't pull the trigger yet because your partner has to catch up to who the person you are becoming and being
hmm,
now.
yeah,
And it was so hyper fixated on you having the problem. You were the drinker. You did this, where it was like, then that partner's stuff was swept under we didn't focus on that, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
when you're no longer the problem, right? Not drinking, then you're going to start to see your partner stuff come to the surface and be like,
right,
oh, but it's always been there. So that's like now
yeah,
you really do have to now discover what the relationship is with you being you being sober and that
hmm,
partner meeting up with who you are becoming and being.
yeah, yeah. No, I wholeheartedly agree. I actually interviewed a couple yesterday, and it was so interesting because it was the man that was the addict and she
Mhm.
wasn't. And when I did sort of like the pre-interview chat, I was like, I want to focus a little bit about, her part too,
Yeah,
right? Because it's so easy to just have all the blame and focus. And even some of the clients that I have, they're like, when is she going to forgive me? When is she going to stop blaming me for everything or keep throwing it in my face? And it's like, well, you drank for all these years. Like, if somebody was in a long-term marriage, it's, oh, you drank for all these years, I need a minute to sort
yes.
of catch up. So a lot of patience is required on both parts, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. They have to be patient with again of what you're about to go through, and that's why you can't just pull the trigger on being like I'm done
Yeah,
when
yeah.
you're in when you're in month 2. Like you can't, it's because I mean nothing's fair, but to be fair, if a person has stuck around too through a drinking
Yeah,
issue, right?
yeah,
Drinking drugs, whatever the problem is, it's like you kind of got to give them a chance to whatever it is you need to stick around with them to see if again you can work it out.
yeah. I gotta let him catch up a little bit.
Yeah.
What about friendships? I think adult friendships can be really challenging.
Yeah.
And, I think as women, we tend to think that our friends are going to be our friends forever.
Mhm.
But a lot of those friendships, even in sobriety and in recovery, can start out kind of codependent. And if one person is sort of evolving faster than the other, just like really intensively working on their stuff,
Mhm.
it becomes more and more apparent that it's challenging to be in, like I had a friendship that I had to let go of that over the years I started to notice this it was an issue around honesty. And my codependency was like always like sweeping it under. And it wasn't like outrageous betrayal or stuff like that, but it was like an integrity issue. And just it's funny because you can just go on in friendships for a really long time, but sometimes there comes a point where it's like, you know what, this just isn't a fit for me anymore. And
Mhm.
I'm a busy person. I have limited time. I need to invest my time into friendships that are nourishing and help me that are helping me to grow and that I
Yeah.
feel like it's reciprocated. And it's, sometimes a hard choice to be like, this isn't really working for me anymore and to just kind of let it go. How
Yeah.
how do you, maybe the same questions are valid around friendships. Have you had that experience where you sort of outgrew a friend and
Yeah.
recovery?
Yeah. Sobriety and recovery aside, right? I really think that that's just life. Like you're not,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? You're not going to
Yeah.
take all the friends with you because
Mm-mm.
it's like, and I've noticed this of just becoming a mom. I became a mom at 38. And I was almost 39. I was a month away from being 39. And so a lot of the friends I have already had kids,
Mm.
are now having kids who are like 10 and up, right? And
Yeah.
so around this time, I see myself, I was focusing more than around friends and relating to more friends who had kids later on, right? And that kind of became more of a relationship because it's really about what you have in common with people, with where you're
Yeah.
at. Same thing of as long as you have friends who are willing to meet you with where you are at in life, then those friends can go the distance. And I have friends like that too, right? Like I have some friends where it's like we only see each other a couple times a year. It's just like, but it's or if I call one of my best friends, Kristen, I'm not going to get on her case because we haven't talked in a couple months. We pick up where we left off, and it's
Yeah.
not like, why haven't you called me? And if you're
No.
dealing with somebody like that asking you why you haven't called them, that is not a healthy person. Like, you know what I mean?
It's
Like,
like, you know what? We're not in high school anymore.
exactly.
If you
And
wanted to talk to me, you could have called.
right. So I just
Yeah.
think that it's life that these people aren't going
Yeah.
to go with you to the end, and that is
Yeah.
okay. But yeah, in my sobriety, there was a couple friendships that I eventually I, it just they served its purpose and outgrew, and it was one
Yeah.
obviously because drinking was not on my list of priorities.
Mm.
Two, because I was no longer I was no longer, because with how some of my friendships were, I was the one who had the problem, right? And then it wasn't a focus on them,
Yeah.
right? Because a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot, but there are some people who want you to continue to have a problem because
Hmm.
they benefit from that. And it's a
Yeah.
deflection off of them, right? So, yes, the friendships have evolved, and but the thing that's awesome is when you put yourself in a situation of evolving
Hmm.
and you start letting go of things that no longer serve you, and then what begins happening is you start attracting people who are like-minded, right?
Hmm.
And again, there's some people that I have met within the last, I would say, like 10 years who have become good friends, where I was like, it just wouldn't have happened if I didn't get sober, right? Because it's like that is
Yeah.
who you are attracting. So the friendship thing is you kind of, I don't mean to sound like an ass for this, but you just kind of got to let go of the dead weight that doesn't serve you anymore in a good way.
I
It's
love
just like,
it.
why
Yeah.
keep holding on to it for what? Like,
Yeah.
with friendships, you got, it's a 50-50. And if people aren't meeting you at that, then it's like, okay, then why am I going to continue to invest this energy in that person?
Yeah. And I love that, this idea of like helpers and the
Hmm.
wounded people,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Like the helpers, there are some people who are like very much in that helper identity
Hmm.
and like they need to be helping people for their own like self-esteem.
Yes.
And then
Hmm.
there's like this power differential. And I've had this experience recently where I was chatting with this gal and she's like, gosh, when I was going through my divorce, this person in my life, I really leaned on them and they were there to help me and so and then she got better and then that friend like that the relationship got weird because
Hmm.
the power differential changed. There
Hmm.
wasn't like this neediness, like they needed her to be needy
Yeah.
and they didn't like it's like yeah it's really interesting to then sort of redefine roles but I feel like that is rooted in codependency, right? There's the helper and then there's like the wounded person that
Yeah.
is but it's like a giver and a taker. But
Hmm.
it's I think it's also challenging for like in a lot of recovery programs there is this idea of mentorship or sponsorship or service. It's really kind of hammered into you and I love it because it's like to me, service is like one of the fastest ways to start rebuilding your self-esteem,
Hmm.
right? As
Hmm.
you're giving to others, you begin to realize you have all this wisdom and resources that you have value, but it can go too far. Where
Yeah.
if you get so into the helper role, suddenly you have all these sick people in your life, and it's all give and no receive. So that's out of balance as well.
Hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, especially too, just like in the space, like, I mean, I'm a sober coach. I charge people, and could I not? Sure, but then it's like that. Then opens yourself up to for that. That's why there's boundaries and whatnot. And
Boundaries.
to a lot of people as well, it's like there's a lot. Yeah, I was a people pleaser. So that was something I had to work on with people pleasing and with codependency, right?
Mm,
Like, but yeah, that helper role. And some people just have that natural gift. And I
hmm.
worked with somebody who had that natural gift where I was like, you just have that energy about you. And people who are not well leech onto that. The takers will leech onto that, right? And suck the
Yeah.
soul out of you if you let them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that when it comes to that kind of stuff, you do have to be careful because that will drain you. That will
Yeah.
completely drain you and take you down and make you sick.
And make you sick.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's that saying that givers need to have boundaries because takers don't have any.
Exactly. Right. Well, and like that person you were describing, and then that person, they got better and they didn't, they took off. They took
Yeah.
off. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, what is our relationship now if I'm not the helper and you're not the
mhm,
sickie?
right.
Yeah. I've been guilty of that many times, the whole people pleasing thing. Learning how to say no without
Hmm.
feeling guilty. I mean,
Hmm.
I think that's sort of like the work of the people pleaser.
Yes.
right. It's I feel like it's wrapped up in a little bit of seeking external validation,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then not being able to say no, like when
Mm-hmm.
you, like an authentic no, like that
Yeah.
can be really, do you, as you were coming out of that, can you think of examples like with friends or at work or in your relationships where you began to say no and like felt uncomfortable or,
Yeah, I mean that's a continuous work in progress, that and
yeah,
that's because a lot of people are like, oh my God, how am I going to say no? And it's like you just have to continue saying no, and then eventually it will feel normal. That will be your new normal, right? And then again,
yeah.
people will meet up with where you are. Um, I remember when I went back to the bar to work. This was one, and I always said, because I actually, when I got sober a couple of years in, I woke up in a career that I hated, where I was like,
Oh
what?
no.
Well, yeah. So, like, I get that of waking up, it wasn't my relationship, but it was in a job where I was like, this is god awful.
Hmm.
And
What
this
kind
is
of work
what
were you doing?
I was actually a medical assistant at a pain clinic, and I wanted to go for my nursing degree.
Mm.
And so I was in the 9 to 5, and that's what I thought I wanted because for 20 years I was a waitress and a bartender. So I did the hospitality industry, right?
Oh,
And so I woke up in this job and I was like, this is just not what I wanted to do. So,
yeah.
bottom line, started my coaching business and then at the same time went back to bartending because I needed to make income as I started to grow my business. And when I went back, I put down some boundaries. And this was a family it was family owned place, but it was one of those things I always said yes to them before. And this time I was like, I'm not going to say yes. This isn't going to be expected of me, right? And so it was hard. And it was like for every time I told them like no, like a couple times I would tell them no, I would then be like, say yes, because I looked at it like, okay,
Mm.
I could work another shift, make some extra bucks, but this isn't burning me out, right?
Okay.
So that was one of those things that took some time.
So it sounded like you had some flexibility though, right? It wasn't
Yeah,
like a hard line thing. It's
yeah,
like you were able to be flexible.
I was able to be flexible, but sometimes people are going to have to put a hard no into some stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I had to do that recently within the past couple of years and again, it kind of went back to some codependency of where I had to tell my mom no on something because at this point it's like, dude, I'm taking care of a child now at this point.
Yeah.
I do not now have the mental capacity to do what you're asking me to do on where I was currently at with that. So I found a solution for her and said, "Here you go." But
What was she asking of you
she was asking of me to deliver groceries, and it
to
was
her?
to her,
Like
and
bring her food.
yes, and it was like, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. Of course, there's a long line of history there,
Yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah,
so I'm not just being an ass and being like, no, mom, like,
yeah. No food
but
for you.
right, like,
Now we have Instacart. Yeah.
right, exactly. That's what I'm saying, where I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to go down this hole and there's a solution, and it's not that your daughters do this for you when
Yeah.
it's not for where I was at that time in motherhood. I mean, even today where
Right.
I'm at, it's just not, it was not something I could take on. If I took that on, then I would have been breaking all my codependency rules and
Hmm.
my boundaries. Do you know what I mean? So it's like that was the
Yeah.
hard no.
Yeah. I feel like a yes has to be a yes without resentment.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's a no.
Exactly. And that was the thing.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying with when going back to work, like that, of doing those couple no's for yes, because it was never a yes followed with the resentment. Where prior to
Yeah.
that, when would say yes all the time, it's like, what am I doing? Like, I don't want to be working right now, right? Like, it's like, God, this is what's
Yeah.
expected of me, and how dare they? So it was exactly that.
Yeah, I feel like if you say yes when you really mean no, I mean, that's a level of self-betrayal
Yes.
that,
Yep.
and when we get sober, we're trying to, what's actually happening is we're building up some self-trust,
Yes.
right? And
Mhm.
And some girlfriends and I, we had this sort of mantra that we would say back to each other. It's like, do not betray her, right?
Mhm.
Do not betray that girl, that woman in you who really wanted, it's like, I can't give another fucking thing. It's like
Mhm.
I don't have time. I just can't, like, you just kind of reach this point where it's like I don't have anything left to give
Right.
anybody else. I need to reserve my energy. And so
Mhm.
this idea of do not betray her, it's like stop it. Stop betraying. And really that's a self boundary as
Mhm.
opposed to setting boundaries with others. I find that it's helpful to give people the language of saying no, because in the beginning, I would hear people say, "No" is a complete sentence. But
Mhm.
that, like, if you're super codependent or a people pleaser and you're just starting, like, that doesn't really work.
No.
Like, people don't feel comfortable. It's like they need language. Like, maybe we can kind of brainstorm a little bit. But it was like, that doesn't really work for me right now, or sort of a
Yes.
softer no.
Yeah, and I will always say, I will always put it up there. No is a complete sentence, but especially too, if you're early on in sobriety, of what you just said, it's like because I will when I put stuff like that up on Instagram, I will always have someone be like, "No is a complete sentence," and it's like, well, no crap, right? Like, I got it, but, like, you're
Captain Obvious.
yeah, like, but let's go back to exactly what you just said. Somebody at day 4, riddled with anxiety, like, just trying not to drink that day is not just going to say no to somebody. I mean, this is a work in progress of that there is also, too, a process of your recovery journey, and I do
Yeah,
believe that what we are talking about right now really fits in 6 months to after a year of being sober and then starting to work on that, yeah? But with the language, it's just like, "No, I can't do." I mean, listen, I'm one on it's okay to fib. In the beginning, it's okay to fib.
yeah,
'Cause because sometimes, like, thinking up, like, thinking up something still could bring somebody a lot of that could still bring them a lot of anxiety, right? Where
yeah,
just sometimes you just gotta say you don't feel good. And in 2025, since 2020 and on, telling somebody you don't feel good, they're like,
yeah.
"Stay away from me."
Yeah, and listen, I don't feel good could mean a lot of different things. Like I'm fucking tired. Like,
Right,
but
right.
you know what else came up for me or I remembered as I used to tell people, let me get back to you. Like instead of being pressured to provide a response in the moment, I'd be like, you
Mhm.
know what, let me get back to you. And then I
Yeah,
could take, because people feel this pressure to answer in the moment. Like, no, you don't have to answer in the moment. You can tell
yeah,
people, let me get back to you. And then you can say no over the phone
yeah.
or
Yeah,
via
or
text.
yeah, or if it's coming through you and text, like, you don't have to respond and think
Yeah.
about it for a day. Like, think
Yeah.
about it for a day and how that's gonna play out and how you're going to feel. So, and then,
Yeah.
yeah, you can say, "No, thank you," or "I don't feel good," whatever
Yeah.
whatever works for you in that moment.
Yeah. I have a client who compulsively says yes to everything.
Mm,
And it was causing her to stress out and all this stuff. And so what we came up with was, before you say yes to anything, you need to look at your calendar, what's happening the day before and the day before that, like what's leading up to the day that they're asking you to commit to something, and then what's
mhm,
happening right after,
mhm,
right? Because that will, if you have a very busy schedule, if you have a lot of commitments, family obligations, you need to consider like where your energy level is going to be at, because we need to
mhm,
be able to respond to these requests in a really thoughtful way. If you know you have a
yep,
lot coming up, you can be like, you know what, I'm sorry, I just have too much on my plate that week. I have other things coming up later in the week that I need to conserve my energy for. We just have to really get to know and be honest about what our limitations are. Like we actually have needs and we
yeah.
have to conserve our energy for obligations that we've already committed to.
Yeah. It was I don't know when it was when I discovered this, obviously within those first couple of years, but I realized that I was not a person. And you know what? It was still when I was working with the 9 to 5 that I was not a person who could do all of these plans on the weekend. I
Mm.
was a person where it was like, okay, one night out, right? Or one activity for the day is enough for me. If I do something
Yes.
2 days back to back, and again, I'm saying, like, if there was 2 parties back to back or, like,
Yeah.
2, like, long daytime activities, it would legit by Sunday night, I would be drained, I would have anxiety,
Yeah.
and that's where I had to start being like, "I cannot live like this," because a lot of people who they do what they were doing in their active relationship with alcohol. They carry that into their sobriety, and then they're
Yes.
like, this is driving me crazy. This is triggering me. I want to drink." And
Yeah.
that you really do. I say it all the time to my clients of protecting your energy, and
Yeah.
you have to protect it, and you have to work what's best to your personality and who you are to soul. That's why I'm really big into, like, are you an introvert extrovert? Do you need that time to recharge for yourself, and doing that instead of trying to go be somebody that at the core you are just not. And when you get sober, that in the process of it, you learn at the core who you are,
Yeah.
you
I
know?
can't tell you how many times I've talked to people who thought they were extroverted because
Mhm.
they were, drinking all the time. And then when they quit, they're like, oh my God, I am an introvert, or maybe
Yep.
even a extroverted introvert where
Hmm.
like I can do social things for a little while, but I need to go home and recharge.
Yeah, that's
Like
how I
that's,
am. I'm both.
yeah, I know me too.
I'm
I'm like,
both.
and it can change too, because I used to be an extroverted extrovert.
Hmm.
And then over time, as I got older, I was like, you know what? I can't do as many activities as I used to, like being in a 12-step recovery community. There's always like anniversary, birthday dinners, parties. There was just so much to do. Like it could totally, like all the activities can totally take over your life. And after a while, I was like, you know what? I'm not enjoying this anymore. And so it's okay to sort of like mid-flight pivot
Yeah.
and be like, oh yeah, I'm not like that anymore.
Yeah, and that's totally fine. That
Yeah.
is, and but that's the thing. That's where you got to listen to yourself of being like, who am I and what do I need? Because if you don't
Yeah.
listen to that, you are just going to burn yourself out or relapse. It will take you
Yeah.
there because then it will build up the resentments and you'll get resentful for everybody else around you. And then you'll start resenting yourself of like, why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep saying yes? And
Yeah.
the reality is of that you might just be a one social person on a Saturday, and that is okay. Like, too many people put too much pressure on themselves to keep being this way of who they were 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And 20 years ago, it was a different time. You were a different person, and you don't have to keep performing to others. Now it's
Exactly.
time for you to just perform for yourself.
Yeah.
That's it.
That was the exact message I needed to hear for myself today.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was telling you before we started, I was like, God, I feel like I'm burning out. It's like
Mhm.
just this constant hamster wheel of, doing the podcast and
Mhm.
coaching and
Mhm.
marketing and doing all this stuff. It's like it's a lot of give. And I'm sort of like in this season of transition myself, which is why I was like, we should be talking about transition. And I hear it, it was so interesting because I don't know if you experience this. When you're a coach and you're going through something personally, we tend to attract people that are going through that same thing.
Mhm.
Right. And so I'm like in this space of transition, and suddenly these people are coming to me saying, hey, I'm transitioning out of this career and into this other career. And so I'm providing support during the transition period, which is so funny because I'm in a transition period and I find myself saying the exact thing
Mhm.
I need to hear. Right.
Mhm.
Or, you and I are having this conversation, and I was like, you're saying all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I needed to hear. It's just funny how we,
Mhm.
attract the exact people that we need in our lives.
Yeah. The universe is doing that, and your energetics of what you're needing.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. What would you say to somebody that's sort of in the transition period? Like I did corporate high tech sales for 10 years. And
Mhm.
for a long time, I knew that wasn't in alignment with who I really was. And it took a lot of effort. What was your transition like going from doing your old type of work to what you're doing now?
Well, there was a lot of building. And at first I was like, "Oh my God, I'm going back to bartending," right? But then
As a
it was,
sober person.
yeah, because everybody was, people were like, "Don't do it, don't do it." And
Mm,
I took on that. And my first shift, for me, it's not for everybody, but this is what I always have to say because people don't get it. That industry breeds addicts, and then it has a bunch of sober people. And
I
because,
know, it's not funny.
yes, and it's so there are so many people who are sober who are doing that because one, they love the industry.
Yeah.
Two, it's a schedule, and the amount of money you make is, you won't get that in many places. It's like you just won't,
Yeah.
especially if you're somewhere good. So like, and there are people who are very talented at their job and provide such a great experience when you go out to dine. So, but when I went back, people were like, "You shouldn't do it, you shouldn't do it." And I took on that fear. And then, so then, I walked in and I was like, "Can I do this? Like, am I gonna just start grabbing like somebody's like pint of Bud Light and slamming it?" Right? Like, that's what I had in my head because these were the stories that I took on from others. And I went in there and I made $300 on a lunch shift. And I walked out and I was like, that was empowering,
That
right?
was empowering.
That was
Yeah.
empowering. So it was empowering to me, but along the way, people are like, "How does a recovering alcoholic, do this?" And I'm just like, "Because it's not an issue for me." I'm
Yeah.
very good at compartmentalizing. Would I recommend that to
Mm,
everybody? Absolutely not, right?
yeah.
But so for that transition, you gotta allow yourself a growing period, right?
Mhm.
Like you have to allow yourself to go through it and shed the identities that you thought, because a lot of people think when they get into a career, they're like, "This is the end, baby." Like, or something.
Yeah.
And a lot of these careers and industries that people get into, it's not the case anymore from what it was in 1950 up until
Yeah.
probably what, 1990 or 2000, when the career force has changed, pensions are being gone, like people aren't at the same job 30 years, 40 years in anymore.
Right.
So you just have to allow yourself, it's almost like a grieving process of who
Yeah.
you were and what you thought you wanted to do and
Right.
where you're going, but also to believe in yourself that this is the next right move for you and your alignment. Because I was sitting in that job being like, "This is miserable. I cannot do this." Like getting like anxiety attacks, those Sunday scaries. I'm like, "This is god awful." So I was fortunate enough to make the transition.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And what was it about the coaching that really drew you to it?
Well, I actually got into with an MLM with Beachbody with health coaching.
Oh,
And
hell yeah.
yes, so I liked
Beachbody.
that. I liked being able to help people. I did love the products and the workouts. So I did really enjoy Shakeology. I had my own success with their products and with their workouts, and I had lost like 20 pounds.
Oh, nice.
And and it got me into a healthier lifestyle. And so I enjoyed the coaching of it. I enjoyed the community building. I enjoyed watching someone's transformation and cheering them on that. And so I was in that for about 3, 4 years, and I would have people ask me all the time about sobriety. And
Mm,
then it wasn't until about after 6 years sober that I then branched out and doing my own thing with Sober Vibes. And for me, it was important to work on my own sobriety and recovery and
mhm.
like codependency, right? And figuring out boundaries, um, and making sure that I was going to be in this for the long run. Not saying you
Yeah.
can't pivot, but this is very, the sober coaching, recovery coaching space is precious. This isn't like, I don't want to say an ass like this, but this isn't just like another weight loss thing. I mean,
Right.
there's trauma involved here. There's, dealing with somebody's emotional needs and dealing with somebody who's very vulnerable in that space. So I wanted to make sure that me getting into it, that I had my own foundation and my own shit figured out, and
Yeah.
knowing that I was going to be in this for the long haul. Because I can't tell you, I mean, either with sponsors I've heard it or coaches too, where it's just like, I feel like I'm not important on them, or they bailed on me, right? Like, I mean, you hear this
Mhm.
and then people are always like, sober coaches is bullshit and all of this other stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, some are, right?
Some are.
There's some shitty doctors out there. There's some crappy lawyers out there. There's some god awful policemen out there. There's all like teachers. Like
Yeah.
there are bad eggs in everything. So
And everything. Yeah.
yeah.
I feel like there's some, I think there's some things that concern me about, like if we're going to talk about, what to look for in a sober coach, I would think a minimum of at least 5 years sober.
Oh,
Minimum.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
In my book, I wrote it out. I'm like, you need to be asking questions, what type of help they've gotten,
Yeah.
like what do they see a therapist? Have they ever seen a therapist? Have they ever, tried at 12 steps? Everything that I have recommended, I have done.
Right. Same.
I have done the dance with therapy, with coaches, with AA. I have with the personal development. The only thing I don't ever recommend is cold plunges because I don't do them and they sound awful. Okay.
I love them. It's so good. We spent all this money on a stupid cold plunge. I
Uh,
love it. Yeah.
and
But
I'm
I don't
sure,
do it. I don't do it in the winter. Let's
right.
be honest. I don't do it in
But
the
yeah,
winter.
with sober, you got to
But
ask these
yeah.
questions, and yeah,
Yeah.
of course they can lie to you, but I do agree with you that there needs to be, because I'm sure you see it more and more where it's like people do want to help, and then they're like, okay, I'm not even at a year, and they start doing this. It's like, no, no, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
You need to figure this out. But I think 5 years, because
Yeah.
too, early sobriety is day 0 through year 5. That is for me what I consider early sobriety.
Yeah.
And you are still figuring that out because so 1, 3, and 5 years are major relapse years. My 5th year, I felt like I was having a midlife crisis at 35.
Yeah, yeah. No, I also think it's important to work with somebody who's actually been through some things,
Hmm.
right? Like I'm
Hmm.
31 years sober. I've
Hmm.
been with my husband since I was 5 months sober. So I have a
Hmm.
lot of marriage experience. I've raised my kids, been through financial ups and downs. It's like I stayed sober through it all. And I feel like I have a lot to bring to the table. And then I see these people online who are, there was one gal recently who was describing alcohol use disorder. And she was using some other language that came from somebody who is very charismatic and charming. But she had no understanding of what actual alcohol use disorder really was.
Hmm.
Right. And all my alarm bells went off. And I was
Hmm.
like, this is not somebody that should be doing sober coaching because we do have to have an understanding of the entire spectrum to
Hmm.
understand where somebody is and what resources they might need to bring
Yeah.
in.
Hmm.
Right. Somebody that's, addiction is a spectrum. And some people that are sort of on the lower end of the spectrum do great with coaching. Some people need to, like I've had clients who I'm like, yeah, you need to go do some EMDR for your
Hmm.
trauma therapy. Like go get a trauma specialist to
Yeah.
handle certain issues. And I am still sort of like a resource coordinator, right? Like
Hmm.
I have the history, I'm keeping track of all the things that they're doing and support through all that stuff. But like I stay in my lane. Like I know where the
Yeah.
limits are and I know when to refer out.
Yeah.
But people who are offering themselves as a coach who don't actually understand what addiction is and what the spectrum is about, that's the kind of thing that really worries me. But like you said, there are doctors, they say that 50% of all doctors are below average.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, we just need to have a lot of discernment. So I would just encourage people that are listening, if you're considering a coach, and consider somebody that has a lot of life experience and understands the whole addiction
Hmm.
spectrum.
Yeah, that's exactly too what I said in my book. Like because through the years, I can't tell you how many women that I've worked with have told me that they have told their therapist that they're concerned about drinking, thinking that they have a drinking problem, verbalizing this, and these
Yeah.
therapists are dismissing them, telling them, no,
Yeah.
you don't have a drinking problem. It's like, excuse you. Well, that's to me, it's mind boggling. And
Yeah.
these
Doctors do it too.
Right, exactly, because they're only in it there of it's like, and again, how many people can sit there and lie on those intake sheets? I used to do it all the time when it was like, how much do you drink? And also too, I worked in a pain clinic. I saw this.
Yeah.
I saw it of like, of people, especially too, if they brought in something up, it is dismissed because we are on a time frame to get the next patient in.
Yeah.
I saw it.
Yeah.
So
Really.
yeah, when you work with somebody, just and if they vibe with you, pick up on
Yeah.
their energy and also too, but ask those questions
Yeah.
of all that.
Ask all the questions. And I would also endorse what you said about the vibe thing. It's like like not all therapists are created equal. Like you
Yeah.
really, and there's all kinds of therapy processes, right? There's like
Mm-hmm.
CBT,
Mm-hmm.
IFS, there's cognitive behavioral, there's EMDR, like there's all kinds of specialists.
Mm-hmm.
So but it does matter, sort of the fit that you have. It's kind of like dating. So don't go to one therapist and say, "Oh, I tried therapy. It didn't work for me." It's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, how many therapists did you try? What kinds of therapies did
Mm-hmm.
you try? What kind of coach did you go to? What were your goals? What were their qualifications? So all these, we have to really just practice a lot of discernment, because
Yeah.
we were talking about transitions, when you are going through a transition period, it is important to call in some help. And so there's just all kinds of help available. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it's good to be
Absolutely.
very clear about what kind you need.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, listen, I feel like we covered a lot of territory here around transitions, how to say no, how to set boundaries, how to ask for what you need. But yeah, this stuff is not easy. It's not cut and dry. But I really appreciate your ability to sort of talk through all the challenges and all the different areas to try to help people figure out what is the right next step.
Yep. And the right next step is what feels good for you, but just don't blow up your life that first year. So
I feel
yes, thank you for having me on. I enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah, we'll have to maybe that'll be the tagline. Don't blow up your life your first year.
Yes, yes, that would be good for sure.
Well, I'm going to be on your podcast pretty soon, so I will
Yes.
look forward to speaking with you again. And as always, it's good to see you.